Imagine you finally did it. You saved up, you took the risk, and you bought your dream home. Not just a house, but land. 500 acres of freedom, a perfect slice of the American West to raise your family and build a legacy. But on the very first day, as you're unpacking boxes under the vast Utah sky, you notice something at the edge of the woods. It looks like a wolf, but it's bigger than any wolf you've ever seen, taller than a man is long, and it's walking towards you not with the caution of a wild animal, but with a calm, unnerving purpose. This isn't a hypothetical. For Terry and Gwen Sherman, this was day one at a place that would come to be known as the most scientifically studied paranormal hotspot on Earth, Skinwalker Ranch. Over the next 2 years, the Sherman family would be forced to confront questions that belong in the darkest of nightmares. What do you do when a creature you've shot with a high-powered rifle simply looks at you and walks away? How do you explain when heavy tools vanish from the ground and reappear 70 feet up in a tree? And who or what is the faceless figure that taps on your children's windows in the dead of night? This isn't just a story about strange lights in the sky. It's about a family's descent into madness and the decade-long scientific investigation that found something far more terrifying than ghosts. When the Shermans moved in 1994, they felt nothing but optimism. The ranch had been empty for years, so they got it for a steal. But before they even unpacked a single box, the house itself seemed to be screaming a warning at them. Every single door and window, even those between rooms, had heavy deadbolts installed on both sides. Massive iron stakes were driven into the ground by the front and back doors, with thick chains suggesting guard dogs of an impossible size. The house wasn't designed to keep intruders out. It was a fortress built to keep something in. The question wasn't if the previous owners were paranoid. It was what made them that way. They tried to ignore it, but the property wouldn't let them. That first day, the giant wolf approached. Terry Sherman, a rugged, experienced rancher, watched it come, a strange calm settling over him and his family. The creature was massive, easily 6 feet from nose to tail. Yet it trotted up to them, wagging its tail, nuzzling Terry's father like a lost family pet. For a moment it was magical, and then the mask slipped. The wolf nonchalantly walked over to a pen holding a calf. In an instant, the friendly demeanor vanished. Its jaws, impossibly large, clamped around the calf's entire head, trying to rip it through the bars of the cage. The trance was broken. Terry grabbed his pistol and fired. The bullet hit. Nothing. He grabbed a rifle. Fired again. The creature didn't flinch. It was like shooting at a statue of iron. After a moment, as if simply bored, the wolf let go, gave them one last look, and trotted off into the woods. When Terry and his son tracked it, they found its massive paw prints in the mud leading into a thicket where they just stopped, as if the 200-pound creature had simply ceased to exist. As they stood there, confused, a strange, foul odor filled the air, a mix of sulfur and rotting meat. It was a smell they would come to know as a signature, a calling card. The phenomenon, the entity, whatever it was, had made its introduction. Now it would begin its psychological war. It started small, targeting Gwen. She went grocery shopping, put everything away, and left the kitchen. When she returned, every item was back in the bags on the counter, perfectly packed. She took a shower, hanging her towel on the hook. When she got out, it was gone. She later found it, perfectly folded, in a closet on the other side of the house. This wasn't just a prank, it was an attack on her sanity. It wanted to isolate her, to make her question her own mind. "Am I going crazy?" she thought, her hands gripping the counter. "Am I losing my mind?" But then it happened to Terry. A 70-pound post-hole digger he'd been using vanished in the time it took him to walk inside for a drink. A week later, he found it, 70 feet up and possibly wedged in the high branches of a cottonwood tree. And in that moment, Gwen's fear was mixed with a terrible, twisted relief. She wasn't crazy, but the truth was far worse. Something was on their ranch. It was intelligent, it was powerful, and it was toying with them. The glitches in reality soon escalated into a full-blown siege. The phenomenon was no longer just moving things. It became hostile. Lights appeared in the sky, not distant UFOs, but low-flying, silent craft that would hover over their home, bathing the property in an unnatural light, as if they were specimens under a microscope. Terry, the capable protector, began to unravel. He transformed from a confident rancher into a haunted, sleep-deprived man, stalking his own land at night with a rifle, hunting shadows. One night, crouched behind shrubs, he watched a black, triangular craft, like a miniature stealth bomber, hover silently over the trees, its multicolored lights methodically scanning the ground. He made the slightest noise, a twig snapping, and in an instant the lights shut off. The craft swiveled to face him directly, a silent, predatory intelligence that knew exactly where he was. He was no longer the hunter, he was the prey. The true terror, however, came for them in their home. At night, tall, shadowy figures with no discernible features would walk out of the woods and approach the house. They would stand at the windows, sometimes for hours, peering in. The family would hear them, rapping their fingers on the glass, whispering to each other in a guttural language that sounded like a mockery of human speech. What do you do in that moment? You're miles from anyone. There's something at your window that has no face. You've locked the doors, but you know, deep down, that a deadbolt means nothing to whatever is outside. Do you scream? Do you hide? Or do you just pray for the sun to rise, knowing it will come back again the next night? The children's grades plummeted. Gwen lost her job. The family was breaking. One night, Terry saw the source. A glowing, orange, oval-shaped hole opened in the air a window, and through it he could see a bright blue sky, as if he were looking into another world, another time of day. Then a long black figure, like the ones that haunted his windows, crawled out of the portal, like the girl from The Ring climbing out of the well, and scurried into the darkness of his property. The ranch wasn't just haunted. It was a doorway, but the final line was crossed with the arrival of the blue orbs. These softball-sized spheres of brilliant blue light would float around the property, emitting a palpable wave of pure terror. To be near one was to feel a dread so intense it buckled your knees. One night, Terry's 3 beloved dogs, fiercely loyal, charged one of the orbs, barking and growling, chasing it into the woods. Terry heard them yelp, just once. He was too terrified to go after them. The next morning, he and his son went to look. In a clearing, they didn't find bodies. They found 3 small, circular patches of scorched earth. In the center of each was a pile of greasy, black ash. The entity had moved from psychological torment to extermination. That was the end. Terry Sherman, a man broken by an enemy he couldn't see, fight, or comprehend, put the ranch up for sale. The story could have ended there, a terrifying piece of local folklore. But it was bought by Robert Bigelow, a billionaire aerospace entrepreneur with a singular obsession: to use the full power of science to prove the existence of the paranormal. He assembled an all-star team of PhD physicists, engineers, and veterinarians called NEEDS, the National Institute for Discovery Science. He chose skeptics on purpose. He didn't want believers. He wanted men of data who could provide irrefutable proof. They moved onto the ranch, armed with sensors, cameras, and spectrum analyzers, and for a year, almost nothing happened. The entity, it seemed, had gone quiet. It was watching them, lulling them into a false sense of security. Then it decided to welcome them. A NEEDS researcher was with Terry when they tagged a brand new calf. 45 minutes later, the calf was found. It had been surgically dissected, its organs removed with what the NEEDSy vet called precision cuts on an operating table. There was no blood on the ground. This was a direct callback to what the Shermans had endured. The hunt was on. As the scientists fanned out, their guard dogs, placed at observation posts across the ranch, all began cowering and whining, all staring at the same spot in the trees. The researchers looked up. Perched on a thick tree limb was a massive humanoid creature, looking down at them. Terry fired his rifle. It vanished into the woods. They tracked it and found its prints, but just like the wolf on day one, they simply stopped. As they stood there, the scientists smelled it for the first time, that same foul signature smell of sulfur and rot. It was a message. I'm still here. But the ultimate display of power, the ultimate act of mockery, came with the 4 prize bulls. The researchers saw them locked securely in a pen. Minutes later, the pen was empty. The gate was still locked from the outside. Panic set in. These were thousands of dollars worth of livestock. They found them crammed inside a tiny, rusted-out trailer nearby. The trailer was so small, it should have been impossible to get even one panicked bull inside, let alone 4. And the door was still wired shut from the outside. The cobwebs on the latch were undisturbed. This wasn't random. It was a magic trick. It was a display of utter contempt. The entity was showing the scientists that their laws of physics, their rules of reality, meant nothing. It was showing them who was in control. The final validation came late one night. 2 NEDS scientists on a ridge saw it with their own eyes. An orange portal opened in the darkness below. Through their infrared scopes, they watched in horror as a tall black creature crawled out, stood up, and began running at an impossible speed straight up the hill, right towards them. It bounded past their hiding spot, a silent, hulking predator, and disappeared into the night. It was real. Everything the Shermans had said was real. After years of study, the NIDZ team left with file cabinets full of data, eyewitness accounts, and physical evidence. They had recorded magnetic anomalies, captured videos of inexplicable lights, and documented impossible events. But they had no definitive proof, no body, no photograph of a creature that would convince the world. The activity on the ranch simply faded away. It was the entity's final power move. It wasn't driven off. It wasn't defeated. It seemed to have simply gotten bored with its test subjects. It was always and completely in control. The story of Skinwalker Ranch leaves us with a terrifying thought. We believe we live in a world of rules, of cause and effect, of physics that we can rely on. But what if that's just a fragile consensus? What if, in certain places, something older and far more intelligent can simply decide to turn those rules off? What if our reality is not a fortress, but a flimsy tent, and sometimes something from the outside, just for its own amusement, decides to tap on the canvas?